Pecha Kucha 239, no more He-Man. Yep, I ran out of the New Adventures of He-Man cartoon. But before it ended, I did decide to do some Skeletor fan art. Because he lost his stupid Shogun helmet and kind of looked creepy and cool for a while. But this was after the worst episode in the run, where some 80s rock star ends up in the show for no logical reason, has a rock concert, and then the credits roll. It's fucking awful. I expected episodes of this caliber to be actually how the show was. I'm surprised it happened so rarely. The best episode, though, was when Skeletor showed up to one of his lieutenant's weddings in a tuxedo and a cape and no pants. And then I on closer inspection, I realized no one showed up to the wedding wearing pants, whereas He-Man showed up not wearing a shirt. What the fucking ever. I'm going to miss this show, I really am. I did start the week messing around with the airbrush, wondering if I could quickly render something with an airbrush, clean it up, and then get something that feels moderately accurate. This is a Predator, of course, because I was looking at old images in my image collection, and I came across a Predator mask because I'm a fan of that shit. So I drew this with the airbrush, and then I used the blur tool to try and kind of smooth everything out, because airbrushing works far more effectively when there are no, shall we say, brush marks. And then I came back on top with some more airbrushing, did a little bit of, I suppose you'd call it decal work on the cranium. Do I think it works? I don't know. Also, the Predator is probably quite dark, which is how I airbrush, which is wrong, so this probably didn't help me prove anything. But it got me airbrushing, so I thought, let me airbrush this picture of Skeletor and see if I can end up with something better. So this is what I was kind of going for. This was the rough premise. Just he's... Skeletor's looking at the camera saying, "It's showtime!" He said it like twice in 70 episodes, so obviously it's his catchphrase. But while I was Googling reference images, it turned out that the Skeletor toy that the Skeletor from this show is based on actually kind of looks like the real Skeletor. There are a few different variants, but he just looks like a science fiction version of the real Skeletor. So the reason he looks so shit in the show is because the animators actually just made him look shit. And the whole point of the cartoon was to sell toys, and they must have fucked that one up. Right, so I did a starting airbrush layer, and then I came back in with a second one to try and define details more, starting with, of course, the most important part, Skeletor's face. And then it was onto his costume. He has a giant skull on his face. His face is a skull, and his chest is a skull. He's called Skeletor for a reason, right? I'm building form at this point while I'm still looking at my reference images. He is supposed to have hands. He is supposed to be pointing at the camera while he says it's showtime. I came up with a couple of different ways to slot his hands, and in the end I thought I really can't be bothered to make this work. Maybe I'll have his Skeletor staff hanging in one of the corners to cover up the dead space behind him on the left, but then I just thought fuck that too, so I just thought, you know what, let's just start shading. I did some soft shading with a multiply layer to just kind of round out Skeletor's skull while I started building the values for his costume, and then I added light from the left on his costume and try to define the lines on his neck to make them look like, how can I put it? They have form. While I'm doing that, I'm trying to build shade on the right, so I'm torn between being subtle, as Scott Harris said I should be when it comes to this stuff, and making sure that it's obvious enough that I get points for it, because I think that strong lighting is the stuff I think is the coolest. Obviously, Flog, one of the key bad guys from the show, I wanted him in the background just looking upset, because that kind of sums up his relationship with everything and everyone. He is the long-suffering, not-so-silent partner of Skeletor and all his ridiculous hijinks. But I was going to do a lot more stuff with Skeletor's headpiece thing, but again, that sounded like too much work for what it was. So I started colouring in. I used an overlay layer, and then I just applied flat colour on top of the grayscale. And then after that, I decided to add some background. I used another overlay layer to add a bit of red to the left and a bit of blue to the right, in the hope to create mood lighting and secondary light sources and stuff like that. It seems like a pretty quick and easy way to get moderately enjoyable results. And then for the first time in what has clearly been at least a year, I did some speech bubble work and realized I've forgotten everything I fucking know. Shout bubbles, I just need to steal a template from the internet, or spend the time to actually make every jagged line not look rubbish, but both of those things were beyond my remit. They end up having a conversation, Skeletor and Vlog, and I think the font size for the dialogue is super small, but I don't really care if anyone reads it, because I can't be bothered to make the speech bubbles bigger. And I put the tails on the wrong speech bubbles because I hadn't actually intended them to have this back and forth thing, but it seemed so appropriate because that's what they do. And this is fan art, so let me reluctantly acknowledge I know enough about these characters to qualify as a fan. That would be the sad clown of the week thing, me admitting that I like New Adventures of He-Man unironically, but that is actually not true. I do not like it unironically. I like it very ironically. Skeletor I like, despite myself, unironically. I think both Skeletors have phenomenal meme appeal, because this Skeletor dances and also wears tuxedos with no pants. But this is where I ended up. I don't think I was unsuccessful with the image, but it was supposed to be more complicated and really a test of my ability to render 3D form using the airbrush. But I kind of tapped out in the same way Skeletor did when a real bad guy showed up that one time, who never came back. But whatever. This is the end of He-Man. This is the end of Skeletor. And we'll see what happens next week.